Hello and welcome to the program. I am Folashade Ogrinde. The exportation of agric produce, no doubt, holds huge potentials for the Nigerian economy. In the first quarter of 2023, agricultural exports accounted for 4.31% of total exports valued at 6.49 trillion naira. The latest data from the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) shows that cocoa beans, sesame seeds, cashew, and 7 other top the list of agricultural commodities Nigeria exported in the first quarter of 2023, generating 279.64 billion naira in revenue. However, Nigeria's Food and Drug Regulatory Agency (NAFDAC) says 10 goods, namely sesame seeds, beans, melon seeds, peanuts, and smoked fish, ginger, spices, hibiscus flower, palm oil, and ogbono, are the commonly rejected export food commodities from Nigeria from 2018 till date. The agency says the rejection is as a result of non-adherence to standardized clearance procedures by stakeholders. Well, for more insight on the issue, Julius Oga, who is an Agric expert, joins us now. Thank you very much for your time. Now, Nigeria's agri produce is still facing a high level of rejection at the global scene. Why has this challenge persisted over the years?
The challenge persists because Nigeria does not have the sufficient basis to meet global standards. And that is not being condescending. That is talking in terms of what we see in reality. We hardly don't add value to what we produce. We produce, and the best we could do in this circumstance is to export raw commodity without value addition. If we had the industrial capacity to turn our produce, agro-produce, name them, cocoa, palm, fruits, yam, tubers, groundnuts, rice, if we could add value to these and turn them into finished products, perhaps we could meet global standards in terms of demand, quality assurance, and all of that. And those are the standards many of those who might want products from Nigeria are looking out for. But when there is no such value addition and you need to export raw produce, and again, the agro-processing is not well developed as it ought to be. So basically, you find yourself in the market, and then you find yourself being out-muscled or shouldered aside by those who meet the standards of what the world is looking out for. I think that's the challenge we have, basically.
So let's break down these challenges now. Are the exporters not sensitized enough, or are the regulatory bodies not doing enough?
Our problems, Volashade, are intractable. And what do I mean? There are regulatory bodies out there, but it's a question of somebody not doing his job and then earning salaries for not doing their job. People don't do what they ought to do and they don't get fired. So it has become an intractable problem in Nigeria. People don't go out for inspection of produce. Standard regulatory bodies are just there and they don't check what people do. And where they try to check, they allow themselves to be compromised and people get away with it. But then we are seeing the consequence. So when we talked about, for instance, if you go to our markets and look at beans and look at rice, you see someone is producing rice somewhere in one village in Nigeria and does not have a destoning machine, or probably just goes to a rice miller who mills the rice, don't destone it, don't even blow it. They fan it as best they can, they package it, and it's out there in the market. The same thing with beans. You find you buy beans and a lot of it is filled with shells, with impurities and all of that. Now, global standards don't accept all of this. And apart from testing for these physical impurities, they probably also test for non-physical impurities, which could be like contaminants. The chemicals we use, the fertilizers we use, will always leave residues on these crops. And when they come out and those people put them through their testing systems and they fail those tests, they have nowhere to go. So the standards regulatory bodies are there, but are people really doing their jobs? And then if you if you look into the circumstances we have, we shouldn't even be worrying too much about exporting agricultural products at this point in time, because we have a lot of shortages within the economy, our own economy, to fuel. There's a lot of hunger in the land, and we need to feed our local population. But then we don't eat cocoa because we still have commodities that we could sell. We don't eat all of the cocoa. We don't process cocoa, so we export cocoa, for instance, and many other commodities besides. If you take the cocoa instance, for instance, if we had the industry, we won't be needing to have to export cocoa beans. And then we won't be needing someone to question the quality of the cocoa beans you have, except maybe at the industry where it needs to be processed. So we would be adding value to the cocoa industry, and by processing it and packaging it for export. When we add that kind of value, the farmer gets richer, the middlemen also get richer, the economy is better for it, and then we have upskilled our manufacturing and industrial capacities. So we could then even have the capacity to want to import cocoa beans from neighboring countries for further processing, assuming we can't meet our own, the local production cannot meet the capacity, the demand of the manufacturing firms. So, but all of these we do not have. So the solution to this would be that we begin to think of the agro value chain as an entire, wealth creation process by itself, where if you produce your yam, you turn it into a finished product, and then you export the finished yam. Mind you, if you don't do it up to standard, again, you will be incapable of exporting whatever you would have processed.
Well, we'll take a break here, but Money Matters returns shortly. Just stay with us. Welcome back. We've been discussing how Nigeria can boost Agric exports for increased revenue generation. And I've been talking to Julius Oga, who is an agricultural expert. Thank you very much, Julius, for standing by. Now, besides rejection, Nigeria's capacity to export agro-produce is also being hindered by the inability to produce enough to meet its food needs before considering exports.
Okay. I think I hinted at this in our previous discussion. Yes, we barely have enough for consumption, but mind you, it's not everything we produce that goes straight into the pot. And I made the example of cocoa. I made the example of cassava and yams. And I'm like, we're saying basically that we're, strategically speaking, have an advantage in this crop in terms of volume. We're leading producers of cocoa. We're leading producers of yam. We're leading producers of cassava. We are producing below our capacity of consumption in terms of rice and grains. We need grains like corn to even sustain the poultry industry, for instance. And then don't forget that what we used to import to augment local production in terms of wheat and all of that are now serious problem because of the crisis between Russia and Ukraine and in other regions of the world as well. So for the things we don't directly consume, like cocoa, we could still maximize value, by exporting them. But then, why is it that since independence, if we start from there, I beg your pardon, that since independence, since 1960, we've not had the capacity to turn our cocoa into finished produce. So for others that are consumables, yes, we need to feed a huge population before we think of even sending anything outside the country to make more money. But for those we don't consume, we need to ask ourselves, why is it that we have not maximized our capacity to turn them into something that brings us even more money rather than the chicken change we get for exporting cocoa beans? Why have we not turned that into an industry? And this is a nagging question that has persisted for decades. And we're not being fair to ourselves. It's a shame that we import palm oil into this country. It's a shame. We should be able to have enough for local consumption produced by ourselves. We should even be able to, maximize this and even export. So what have we not done right? Why have we let the industry, the agro-processing industry, to collapse? If you go into Zaria in Kaduna State, you will find the shells of what used to be Pize, a manufacturing company of consumables. If you go to Plateau, you find NASCO. NASCO is still managing marginally to operate. Used to produce household produce and consumables, fast food items. If you go to Kano, you find textile factories. So if we were running these things the way we ought to be running them, they will be, absorbing what we produce locally and turning them into finished products. So we won't even be thinking of exporting raw commodities, we'll be thinking of exporting finished products. But our population has grown and the need for self-sustenance has increased. So we should even be thinking of improving what we produce so that we don't go back to that issue of, the government having to persuade Nigeria to consume Nigerian produced rice. If Nigerian produced rice went up in terms of standard, and now if we even talk of standard, if you look at it, what are we measuring in terms of standard? We're measuring in terms of the quality of the finished product. We're not even talking of the nutritional content of it. If we talk of the nutritional content of it, what we export, making a particular reference to rice now, what we import, a particular reference to rice, is highly, presentable. But what is the nutritional content in comparison to what we produce locally, which has a lot of impurities, but has higher nutritional value? So what are we talking about? Why are we eating rice? Is this just to fill the tummy? You're eating it because you want value from it. You want nutritional value from it. So if we could turn our local rice into what it is that interests us in foreign rice, then we would have added value to the Nigerian farmer. So we'll be buying premium, locally produced premium rice. And then with additional incentive, which is what the farmer will get when he gets added value, he would be encouraged to produce more to the extent that maybe we could saturate the local market and begin to think of exporting Nigerian rice. So it's a give and take. We have to look at these things intensively and think of what we can fill, the gaps that exist, how we can fill those gaps and raise the standards. It will be for our own good. As a regional power, we should be the ones talking about what can we supply to our neighboring countries in West Africa. How can we feed them? How can we open up our markets to them so that we can sell Nigerian rice? So it will be premium value for us. So we'll no longer be relying on oil revenue all of the time.
Now, agricultural research can also provide feedback on which technologies are successful at farm levels. Now, to what extent would you say Nigeria has been able to optimize research for agri sector development?
All right, thank you. We have quite a lot of research institutes, farm research institute, forestry research institute, poultry research institute. We even have one in Vom in Plateau State. Basically, they're supposed to be there to help the farmer, the economy, the government, and everybody, bring out the best of what obtains in terms of global standards and competition. So they are there, but I would say, quite unfortunately, that most of them are existing as bureaucracies. They're existing like place where people push files around, wait for allocation for federal government, maybe buy cars, and they are not optimally functional. They are not adding the maximum value they should be adding, and we are the lesser for it. We are the losers of all of this. But research is very important in all that we do because agriculture is basically a science. Our research institute should be telling us at this point in time that what we are being encouraged to do may not be helpful to us in the long run. For instance, if you tell farmers to use fertilizers year in, year out, to use chemicals year in, year out, we are degrading the soil balance. We are making our soils consistently more and more acidic. We are killing soil organisms. Let me tell you for free that everything that exists in nature has a symbiotic relationship with the other. For instance, if you find a tree by a rock, both of them are mutually benefiting each other. So if you find soil organisms in the soil, they are beneficial. They add to soil aeration, they add to soil nutrients. They help the crops in ways that are not obvious to us. This is what our research institute should also encourage us to be interested in. So you don't go giving the farmer fertilizer. The fertilizer seller becomes a middleman. He's just interested in selling his commodity. The people who sell agrochemicals are just interested in selling those chemicals. The farmer is trying to improve yield. The farmer is not aware that the pests are somehow adapting to the chemicals you're using today. The grasses, the weeds are adapting to the herbicides you're using today. After you have used them for several years, you discover they are no longer as effective as they ought to be. So you need even stronger herbicides and pesticides to control pests and to control weeds. The soil is getting affected. It gets more and more acidic. So when it gets more and more acidic, we who consume the products, the finished products from this produce, we're the ones who will come down with kidney disease, heart diseases, cancers, and all whatnot things you don't even know anything about. The research institute should be telling us, giving us this information and telling us where it is we can create a balance, produce what is good for us, what is nutritional, what is helpful to the soil, and health-wise for us who consume those products. So, but like I said, many of our research institutes are operating like bureaucracies. That shouldn't be. They should be practical institutions that have an interface with the Ministry of Agriculture. They have an interface with the farmers. They have an interface with consumers so that we all know what is good and how not to use things in excess.
Well, Julius Oga, Agric expert, thank you very much for your time and your contribution. I need to wrap on the program. See you again next time. I am Folashade Ogurinde. Bye for now.